What do you think about the censorship you've endured?
Oh, to me, Megyn, that's the most disturbing feature of this. This kind of bewildering response to COVID that we've seen. First of all, I want to say this, that I'm accused of promoting vaccine misinformation, but nobody, not Instagram, not the White House, not anybody else, has actually identified a statement that I've made that is incorrect. There were no statements on Instagram. I didn't even say that, the virus came from Wuhan. I just said it should be investigated because it would be weird if the guy who was financing those experiments and may have created the virus is now running the pandemic response. And so these questions should be asked. I didn't say it would happen because I couldn't at that point. I have not made any inaccurate statements as far as I know. If I did make one and it was identified, I would immediately apologize and withdraw it. Instagram or Facebook acknowledges that it uses the term vaccine misinformation as a euphemism for any statement or assertion that departs from government proclamations, whether they're factually true or not. So my crime was criticizing government policies. It was not passing actual misinformation. And that's a problem for our government. Adams and Madison and Jefferson said we put freedom of speech in the First Amendment because all of the other rights are dependent on that right. And if a government can silence criticism, it has a license to commit any atrocity. And that's why it's like, when I was young, I supported the ACLU and others who were supporting the right of Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois, not because I was repulsed by their ideology and by their statements and horrified by them. But, at the same time, we need to be able to be willing to die to protect their right to say those things. And that's, what they understood, our ancestors in the American Revolution. And that's what generations of writers, of politicians, of respected leaders have warned against any government that tries to limit speech. And now it's very strange we're living in this world where it's become okay. In my political party, I saw a Gallup poll recently. It was either Gallup or Rasmussen that said that something like 70% of Democrats support government restricting the speech. And, it's almost inexplicable to me that we could be in that place right now. I believe my political party was the party that would go to the mat to protect people's right to say what they want. And that's so critical for our democracy. And, it also is critical to public health. Listen, I may be wrong about the things that I talk about, but, why can't we debate them? Why can't we hear these discussions about masks? Okay, I've sued agencies for 40 years for failing to go through a regulatory process to have an environmental impact statement where it explains which has to explain the scientific basis for new regulations or actions, show the studies, and then do a cost-benefit analysis. None of that happened. It was, we just suspended democracy. We suspended due process. And once they got rid of freedom of speech, they went after all the other. They closed 1 million churches, all the churches in this country for a year with no public hearing, no discussion of the science, no offering of, a single scientific study to justify it. They shut down 1 million businesses with no just compensation, no due process, no just compensation, a direct violation of our Constitution. They got rid of Seventh Amendment jury trials against any company that says that they're involved in providing a countermeasure. If there's a vaccine company and you get injured, you have no rights to compensation, no matter how grievous your injury, no matter how reckless their conduct, no matter how negligent their conduct, you cannot sue that company. And then, they got rid of the prohibitions against warrantless searches and seizures with all this track and trace surveillance that we now have to give our private information and our private medical records to people to get into a bar, to get on an airplane or whatever. And, there is no pandemic exception in the U.S. Constitution.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.